All right. Welcome. Welcome to Chebacco Chats, Season 4. This is Episode 8. And I'm Raney Bench, the Executive Director for the Mount Desert Island Historical Society. And I just wanted to say thank you to Machias Savings Bank, who is the Chebacco Chats sponsor. We're grateful for Machias for all their continued support for both our exhibitions and our public programs. Chebacco Chats uses a webinar format, so you can see and hear us, but we cannot see or hear our audience. We invite you to use the chat feature or the question and answer at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to ask during the webinar today, that will be the best way to do that. I'm really excited for this edition today and to introduce our moderator, Bruce Jacobson, who's the project manager for the History Trust. The History Trust is a collaboration of 14 regional organizations working together to share historic resources through a common online database known as Digital Archive. Bruce will lead a conversation with me and our special guest, Willie Granston, who is chair of the board of directors for the Great Harbor Maritime Museum and is an expert on the history of Mount Desert Island. Willie and I co-edited the 2023 edition of Chebacco on maritime history, which will be arriving in mailboxes next week or in a couple weeks. It went in the mail today. If you're not already a member of the Historical Society, please join today so you can receive this new edition of Chebacco. We've invited Bruce to lead this discussion because this is the first time in Chebacco's 24-year history that it's been edited collaboratively with another organization. And through a career with nonprofits and the National Park Service, Bruce shares a similar passion for collaboration that brought Willie and me together to create this edition. So Bruce, thank you so much for joining us today. You're muted.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here. Thank you. And returning to Chebacco Chats. And I'm especially pleased to be here with you, both of you, who are leaders in preserving and presenting the history of our region. So, Raney, you mentioned that developing this edition of Chebacco Chebacco, the journal, was a collaborative effort. So who collaborated and how did that work?
Yeah, it was a collaborative effort. Chebacco is always collaborative in that we seek authors and scholars and resources from a lot of different organizations and institutions. But in this situation, the collaboration went a little bit further in actually editing the journal together, which was a new process. So creating the Maritime Edition, it seemed like a really natural outreach and extension to work with the Great Harbor Maritime Museum to be able to bring together the different areas of expertise that our organizations had to create a really rich and varied edition focused on this specific topic.
So working with Great Harbor was important. What about collaboration just in general with other organizations? You know, what was important about the Great Harbor Maritime Museum and just what is generally important about collaborating with others?
So, well, I guess I'll answer that first.
Oh, yeah, you go.
If I can answer that one. I think the interesting thing here between Great Harbor Maritime Museum and MDI Historical, of course, is that we are only separated by a handful of miles, and it makes sense that we'd collaborate on an edition that's dedicated to maritime history. Of course, there's also a huge amount of overlap between Great Harbor's collection and MDI Historical's collection. We have items that relate to the same families, that came out of the same houses, that tell a lot of similar stories. Our audiences are oftentimes very similar, but the fact is that Raney's knowledge and my knowledge don't always overlap perfectly. So by collaborating together, both as organizations and as people, allowed us to leverage our knowledge, our collections, and also our professional connections to tell new stories and to tell them as fully as we possibly could.
Anything to add to that, Raney, about collaboration?
Yeah, I think for the relationship with this edition for Chebacco, absolutely. Being able to network into different areas of our various expertise was really important. And it just continues to build on the collaborative efforts that we've been working on island-wide and through the History Trust. And so finding meaningful ways to sort of continue to enhance collaboration and to grow it, I think are values that we all three share in this conversation.
So it's, you described the benefits to the organization and your mission, but who cares? Who else benefits?
Well, I really think that the community benefits from collaborations like this because, as Willie pointed out, we're not experts in all the things. So for a Mount Desert Island Historical Society to try to produce a maritime edition without the input from experts on maritime history, we would be telling an insufficient story. We wouldn't really be able to capture the depth and the richness and the variety that the topic deserves. And so collaboration allows for multiple voices, perspectives, new scholarship, new history, and new networks of people coming together to share all the different kinds of things that they're working on and projects that they're passionate about.
Okay. So the public benefits, you benefit, and researchers benefit. So we're talking about maritime history, and certainly MDI, has a diverse relationship with the waters surrounding MDI. We are an island after all. But this is the first time that Chebacco has dedicated a full edition to maritime history. Why now? How did you decide on the maritime theme, and why was that theme deemed appropriate?
Yeah, the maritime theme, it was sort of interesting. I was working with artist Jennifer Steen-Boer on a series of climate change projects as part of a larger project that we do called Landscape of Change, where we're using historic resources to document climate change. And Jen did a series of really moving artistic works using history and science to show changes that are taking place in Frenchman Bay and larger in the Gulf of Maine. And so I was thinking about that change over time and how change and the island's relationship with the sea create a certain degree of vulnerability and opportunity and economic dependence, and certainly geographic dependence. And so I realized Chebacco had never really explored that theme in and of itself. And it seemed like a really great opportunity to look at all of the different ways that our relationship with the ocean on this island has evolved and changed over time.
And so as director of the MDI Historical Society, you're the prime editor, correct? So it was your decision as to what the topic was going to be?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. And Willie, what appealed to you about getting involved with this and co-editing on the maritime theme of Chebacco?
Well, when Raney first came to talk to me, it didn't take a whole lot of convincing because over many years, I've had lots of different ideas about exhibits and research projects that never came to fruition. I mean, on this screen here, I look at that top center picture of what looks like a really average metal thing. And it's one of my favorite objects in the entire Great Harbor collection. It's a pogey press. And it represents this incredible boom and bust economy that only lasted for a few years. It's come back in recent years. There's a boom going on right now. And so I'd always thought it was so interesting. I had this whole file on the pogey industry and what this thing was. And so having the opportunity to talk with Raney and think about this theme gave a chance to bring out some of the research files that I've been setting aside for years and think about, well, are there individuals who might be interested in taking on this topic or writing about it? Are these stories, or are there new stories that, like the pogies, that maybe people aren't fully aware of? So I think that was a big part of the interest for me, and also the opportunity to collaborate both between institutions, with local historians, with interested members of the public, thinking about a whole variety of topics. I mean, these pictures here on the screen represent quite a number of themes and topics and elements that relate to maritime heritage, our local culture, any number of things.
So before I ask my next question, I just remind folks who are watching that we'd like to hear from you. So please put any comments you have or questions you have in the chat, and we'll get to those near the end of our discussion. So I know that research for Chebacco has benefited from collections that are cared for in many organizations, some of them outside of MDI Historical and the Great Harbor. And a lot of that research was done through local collections, things that are held here on Mount Desert Island, or at least in the land surrounding the waters that surround the island. So tell us about the outreach of to other collections that went into these specific articles about maritime history of MDI.
Well, a lot of the research was done by the authors themselves. I mean, some of them proposed article topics, or in the case of the Pogge Press, Natalie was already thinking about this as a topic and had been for a while, so she had done lots of research. A lot of the authors had done research in national collections, in some cases international collections, major online databases. And I think one of the interesting things about doing research today is that so much is online, not everything, but you can do a great deal of serious primary source research online. Newspaper databases have been incredible. But it's also important to notice and to recognize that so much of our stuff is available locally. And what's really helpful for us is that the History Trust and the Digital Archive has made so much of that available digitally. Previously, items were stored in individual collections, in individual buildings. You had to know what was where. And now, thanks to the Digital Archive, so much of it can be done from your couch. And so, not to spin the tables, Bruce, but maybe you can talk for a minute about the History Trust and the Digital Archive, which you know so well, and it's become so central to local history, to research, and of course, it really embodies the collaborative efforts that shaped this issue of Chebacco.
Yes, of course, I'm one of many folks who are involved in the History Trust, and actually a latecomer to many who might be watching, who, 10 years ago had this idea and developed an organization, which is now a nonprofit here on the region of Mount Desert Island. And collaboration, you're correct. Collaboration is key to the success of the History Trust and its member organizations. We work hand in hand and try to learn from each other and each other's organizations. And then each of our member organizations also partner with their communities. So collaboration and working hand in hand with others is really fundamental to the reason why the History Trust was founded and how the History Trust operates. So I'll just briefly mention that, a lot of the information about the Trust is on our website, historytrust.org. And there we present local collections in a searchable database known as the Digital Archive. And so that's what you're looking at here, is just a results page from the Digital Archive. And there's nearly 50,000 items that our members have loaded up to the Digital Archive. And we use that in many ways. Most importantly, as you noted, Willie, it's available to members of the public, researchers, scholars, high school students, anybody who's interested, to go to historytrust.org and type in a search term, and then you will get results. And this is just an example of some results that came from one search. On the left-hand side, you can, if you only wanted to learn about businesses associated with the topic, you could click that first item. But there's a lot of flexibility in how this information is presented. And once you click on one of these images, you'd go to the actual collection. So in this case, the first one says Bar Harbor Historical Society. So you'd go to their website and learn more about that particular item. So the Digital Archive is an important resource for our members and for the public, but we also have training resources about collections care and management, and representatives of these various organizations get together regularly to exchange ideas, talk about what's going on. So we have representatives of local historical societies, museums, libraries, and other nonprofits that have collections. There's a couple of our organizations that just have collected a lot of stuff over the years, but it's important stuff. And so the Digital Archive and the History Trust allows that information to be available to the public. But this is not new to both of you, because both of your organizations are members of the History Trust. And in fact, you've both served as officers of the History Trust. So I'd like to turn the tables back on you and ask how the History Trust has changed history research and collaboration in your experience.
I think it's revolutionized what can be done here through research and MDI. Of course, it used to be that a researcher like me, I just had to know what was in each collection and be able to put together in my head how objects that might be on other sides of the island in very different buildings are related. And now you can sit on the couch and I can search for a family name or a topic or a theme, it gives an increased awareness to everybody of what's available in various collections, and to access them in ways that they can't be accessed physically. I mean, you can put objects in the same file on your computer, even when they're in different buildings on opposite sides of the island, or even off island too. It also decreases the harm caused by continued handling of these items. There are certainly times when you've got to see the original object, but a lot of times seeing a picture of it or seeing photographs of the pages of a journal provides the information that you need. And even though our two collections overlap a lot, MDI Historical Society and Great Harbor are in different locations. We have very different collections management systems, but thanks to the History Trust, the digital archive, we can research our own collections. Anybody can research our own collections. And we also know that in both cases, we're putting more things online. We're actively engaged in putting more resources out for the public. I think it's a really positive development here in the area.
Raney, did you have any response to the benefit of the History Trust?
Yeah, I mean, I just completely agree with what Willie said. I would highlight that I wrote an article for Chebacco in 2013 about the KKK. And it was very difficult for me to find the resources about the KKK because I had to go physically to every location and pull through the collections. And some organizations have full, complete catalogs of what they have in their collection, and other organizations don't. And so you had to figure out who's the right person to meet with, what time can you meet, can they, pull out, do they have time to pull out the records? And so there was a certain degree of like increased time and sort of a cumbersomeness to research before the History Trust and before all this was digitized. And now I look for KKK resources, and there's so many pictures and stories, and my article comes up as a reference for people. And so it's made the ability, especially for, I would say, like non-professional historians who don't do this for a living, but are passionate and interested in history, but don't necessarily either know how or have the resources or time to go to all these different locations. Something like this really makes history equitably accessible to everyone. And that is revolutionary, and I think really, really valuable.
And it's all, in the case of the digital archive, it's all focused on our region. And I know that as for the Chebacco Journal, that there was a lot of other collaboration with organizations outside of our region, but certainly the History Trust, I would agree, is a great resource for those of us interested in MDI and the surrounding area. We're all about collaboration, and in fact, so has Chebacco Journal been about collaboration. Really, as I understand, all of the authors have always been volunteers. And that has really been fundamental to the creation of every single issue. What we're in number 24 at this point.
Yeah.
So think about the number of volunteers that have collaborated in creating every single issue as authors. As you mentioned, this is the first time that there's been collaboration between two organizations to actually edit and then produce the journal.
Yeah.
Describe how you found those authors. How did you match the authors, the kind of stories that you wanted to tell in this edition? And in fact, what kind of mix were you looking for? What were the stories you wanted to tell?
Yeah, getting the authors is always a really interesting process. And I'm glad you pointed out that they're volunteers. They're amazing volunteers who spend a lot of time and energy, not only producing the original draft, but going back and forth with the editors to be able to get it to the condition that we want it for Chebacco in terms of length and quality and theme and voice. So there's a lot of time that they give for this process. And there's a lot of value to the fact that they volunteer that time. So finding the authors is a combination of knowing people who are working on projects or who are interested in certain projects and seeking them out if that matches the theme, which is where this collaboration was so vital, is because Willie and I both have different networks of people that we know are working on different topics. And so we were able to sort of tap into those existing networks. But we also don't want to just keep talking to the same people. So we put a call for authors out publicly. We send it out through, yeah.
Didn't you show me a database or a spreadsheet of how you found all these authors?
Well, yes, we do. This is our management for when, as Willie and I were conversing about how we wanted to build the stories and identify the authors. So yeah, so we have a sort of a network of people we know, and then we put out, and then when Willie and I developed a list of topics. So you can see here, we were really, really cognizant about covering a wide breadth of time of maritime history. We wanted to get pre-contact, pre-European contact through contemporary. And so sort of the first piece of that is going through and starting to identify the centuries and the topics and what is the most important thing to sort of capture within those different time periods. Who do we know that's working on it? We put the call for authors out, and then we get people coming to us saying, oh, I'm working on this, or I'm doing that. And then what we end up with is a list of sort of blanks where we really want to talk about the Berwyn Mutiny. This is really important. Who do we know that might be interested in researching this topic and doing more about it? So there are only like anywhere from 12 to 14 articles in each edition of Chebacco. But as you can see on the screen, we actually recruit usually 18 authors, knowing that it's really time intensive and not everyone will be able to see the article through, because life gets in the way sometimes and you just can't finish it, and that's fine. So we always try to have a balance of a few extra articles, knowing that some people just won't be able to do it. And Willie, do you have anything to add about sort of how we did this process?
Yeah, I think I would add that from the start, you and I thought a lot about what did maritime mean as a theme. I mean, certainly maritime history conjures certain images of big sailing ships. It's oftentimes very masculine as a theme. And we wanted to push back against that. We wanted to push back and say, you know, it's more than just ships and shipping. Sure, there's an economic impact, but there's a daily life impact, a human interest impact. We wanted to consider a great big broad swath of time to make sure that various centuries were represented, lots of different topics. And we also wanted to make sure that the topics that we chose weren't overly redundant. We didn't want too much of anything that might get overwhelming. So we went about thinking major themes, but also thinking about transitional moments in local history. What did it mean at various times to have a maritime connection in the early 19th century, in the late 19th century? How do major shifts like the arrival of summer residents in the post-Civil War years relate to maritime history? And that's where, you know, that wonderful article about Harrison Bird Brown, the artist, comes in, and, you know, his paintings and seascapes. How is that related to maritime history? I think the other thing too is that we said from the start that we wanted to try to get as many different voices represented in these articles as we could. We talked about Indigenous stories. We talked about female-centered articles, elements that maybe get left out of traditional maritime histories, and also realizing that maritime doesn't have to be on the ocean directly, that there's a great land focus on this too. I mean, we are surrounded by an ocean, but MDI and the surrounding land masses are land. So we wanted to think about how they related back and forth. So it was a very interesting process thinking about this. What does maritime mean and who does it affect?
Well,
So certainly, go ahead.
I was just saying, I'm glad you mentioned the gaps, because that was one of the harder parts, right? Like in 12 articles, we can't tell all of MDI's maritime history. And so we know we're missing stories. And I just want to really acknowledge the fact that it's really hard, again, as volunteers, that we find authors who are already interested in a subject or want to pursue it about this really like 100 square miles of one landmass. And so we can't always find what we want. But I think it also leaves opportunity for these stories to be pursued and told in this venue in the future, or in other venues through exhibits or public programs or whatever. Like, we really would encourage other people out there, contribute your voices, you know, like get interested in something and dig into it and find ways to share that passion. And so we can acknowledge that we're never going to be able to get all of this captured, but we do our best.
That's a great invitation. Hopefully some of our viewers will, you know, have a passion about a topic. And, you know, it doesn't have to be maritime. It can be anything to do with local history, because I'm sure there's going to be more issues of Chebacco.
Absolutely.
How far in advance do you plan the topics?
2 years.
2 years.
Yep, so we have 2024, the authors are already writing, and we're in the process of planning 2025.
Excellent. And as you think about the future, you know, how do you use the journal to kind of leverage collaboration that, you know, how do you use the collaboration in the journal to leverage that beyond the pages of Chebacco?
Well, we have a few things that we're doing that are pretty exciting. I think this is maybe one of the first things that is new for us a little bit, is again a part of this collaboration, and that is a series of public programs and events that we're planning for this summer. So this is 4 different events that we have with authors from Chebacco, but these are not like a Chebacco chat where the author is talking about their work and their research. I think, Willie, you said it best, that these are things that are taking place, what did you say, in addition to, or broader projects that not are just in MDI or in this region, but statewide projects. So I don't know if you want to add to that, Willie, about.
No, I think you said it exactly. I think that one of the interesting things about Chebacco is that the way that, you know, in sometimes the articles that show up in the Chebacco relates to larger things that are happening that maybe we aren't even aware of it at the time. And so in this way, we have some of the Chebacco writers working with other individuals about topics that are related to the Chebacco theme. It's a way to think about local history in relationship to larger interests outside of our area altogether, by people that maybe individuals nearby haven't ever met or heard from.
And Chebacco articles are limited, you know, in their size. They're only 3,000 or 4,000 words. There's so much more to say about any one of these topics. And so being able to invite these authors to really like branch out and share all the things that ended up on the cutting floor that they couldn't fit into the article, but are still super interesting or slightly relevant and a little bit, you know, weren't quite of the focus of the article, but tell a more complete story, are so important. And so having these public programs, not just of Chebacco Chat, but actually like bringing authors here, getting to be with them in person and talk about the other projects that inspire them. I'm super excited about doing that.
So as we near the end of our time together, I would invite anyone watching to post any questions in the chat. And we will then, you know, Raney and Willie could respond. And before I ask my final question, I just wanted to thank both of you for all you do to further collaboration about the history of our special place that we call home. You contribute a lot, both professionally and personally, in all the work that you do. So final question, you know, the journal will be in people's hands in a few weeks. And when people actually pick it up and read 1, 2, or maybe all of the articles, we hope, what do you want them to take away from this edition of Chebacco? Willie?
I guess I would want them to think about the potential maybe for new articles. I think that Raney made a really good point there, where she said that we did leave things out. You know, it just happens to be the ugly truth that in some cases we couldn't get articles written, or that we couldn't get people that want to take on certain topics. So I think rather than being frustrated about what isn't in the journal itself, to take that frustration and maybe do something about it. I also think the concept of collaboration, if you don't want to do it by yourself, maybe you find somebody else that wants to work with you, or the potential to work with area organizations or scholars, your neighbors, your friends. I think it's very important to remember that we live on an island, that coastal Maine, that Hancock County, that Maine in general is a very small geography with a lot of very tight connections, and leveraging those in ways that are productive and interesting and fruitful. I think that there's lots of potential here for the future.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would say for me, what I really want people to take away from this and everything is sort of my mantra, is that history is relevant. So all the articles in here point to the economic, the environmental, the cultural, the spiritual relationship that people on MDI have with the sea and with maritime culture and history and economy. And there is a volatility to that. There's a vulnerability to that. There are ways that we can learn from the past that inform the decisions that we make in the future. And so the more that we understand all of the different things that have changed and flexed and moved in over time and how those have impacted the lives of people on the island, the more that we are going to be able to make really good decisions for future generations. I really believe that history is a vital piece of the whole puzzle of how we communicate as a community and how we make decisions as a community.
And how
So
we
we-
are a community. Also, don't forget that, how we are a community through this shared
Yes,
history of this place.
totally. Yeah.
We've hit our time mark, but we do have a question. So I invite everyone to stay on. And I know that Raney has a few closing thoughts. But if you need to leave, we understand. So there's one question we have here. How did you blend your different visions of what this issue should be? How did you blend your different visions between the two of you?
That's a great question.
In all reality, I don't know that our visions were as different as we might have expected. Raney and I are very different people. I mean, we had lots of realizations of that over the course of the last year, but I think our visions of what we wanted to see in this issue were not dissimilar. I think also we came in with a very open mindset of what this could be, and we wanted to see what people wanted to write about, what materials came to light. I don't know. What do you think, Raney?
Yeah, I think the vision for the edition, we were like really solid on that. And like there was a mutual respect for the strengths that each of us brought to the conversation. And so I think that helped. It was like I never felt like we had to battle about whether something was worthy to be included or not. There was one period of time, which I haven't told you this, Willie, but like I got a little worried about my Diver Ed article because it's like all about the seafloor. And I thought, this isn't about ships or building, but you never blinked. And as you said today, because maritime is not ships and, shipping, it's so much more than that. And so I was really grateful and appreciated that learning experience with you and from you for my own education. I think the harder thing to blend was like when you get into the nuts and bolts of just like, we are not Willie's most of the time in Boston and I'm on MDI, and we're each working with different authors and we're trying to share everything digitally. And while there's so much strength now in digital sharing, there's still limitations. Like I still forgot a file share once, or, like we messed up on a couple image things. And so like that was harder. It's just, trying to work on a deadline together when we both have different jobs and we both are in different places and we'd never done this before. But I think we handled it well and that we've come through as friends. Still, we can kill each other. And that like I've said, I learned a ton from Willie in this process and I'm super grateful. It was a really, really great experience.
So I'm going to turn it back to Raney, but Willie, any final thoughts before we end?
No, I think that Raney basically hit it on the head there. I think that we came in with a very open mind of what did it mean to be marine? What did it mean to be maritime? I think that some of the compelling articles in this are the fact that they aren't old-fashioned traditional maritime history. We are pushing the boundaries here. I think that that's one of the great successes of this issue, and I hope that people enjoy that. I think that the Diver Ed article about the seafloor is as interesting as anything else in the whole issue.
And Carl Little looks forward to reading that.
Yeah.
So Raney, back to you.
Yeah, and I just want to mention Carl also put in the chat the details of the Jefferson, Nowicki, and Earl Shuttleworth program that's going to be at the library in June. That was listed on my list, but check our website and Facebook page for more information and updates about the programs and those details if you didn't get it from the screen. So just going to wrap up. Thank you, Bruce and Willie, so much for having this conversation and wrapping up our Chebacco Chats season 4. Thank all of you for joining us. It's been a great final episode in our spring season, but we have many more programs that we're offering in person and online, trivia nights, events, public programs all throughout the summer and the fall. So make sure to check our Facebook page and website and our newsletter for more information. Chebacco chats are available to view on our website the week after they air. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel at MDI History and be notified when we upload them. So the new Chebacco went in the mail today, so we should be able to have people receiving it next week and the week after, and we'd love your feedback on what you think and ideas for the future after you've had a chance to read it. So if you're not a member already, please become a member by visiting our website. And thank you all very much.